that
will
cook.
It's Halloween, which means tomorrow we can all start putting up the Christmas lights. It also means that the barrier between our world and the world of demons and stuff has been left slightly ajar. The dead will rise and commingle in the world of the living, causing an increase in the sale of abnormally small chocolate bars. When those very demons come knocking at my door, chanting,
Trick or treat.
I'm gonna give them this. Looks like a sweet, sweet treat, right?
You could not be more wrong.
It's a trick. Now, one thing you probably didn't know is that demons are notoriously myopic, which means it's actually very easy to trick them. Now, this cupcake is going to be made from meatloaf. The icing is going to be aligot potatoes, and the sprinkles, little bits of crispy fried pig's heart. Everything a demon needs to navigate this crazy world. To start, you're going to want to get a pig's heart from your local butcher. When they ask you what for, tell them you've acquired a recent interest in vivisection. You won't be welcome back, but the look on their face as they call the police will be well worth the social stigma. Cut away as much meat as you can, doing your best to avoid the rubbery arteries. Those are not good eating, no matter how long you braise them. Then, once you've got a good haul, braise those heart pieces for a good long time. Mine took upwards of 6 hours. The reason for this is because the heart is actually the most well-worked muscle in the body. Because of this, it's extremely tough. Regardless, if you braise it long enough, it will tenderize and become relatively pull apart, as you can see here. Then, cut up those pieces into tiny little pieces and crisp them up in some hot oil. But first, we're gonna make a Mirepoix to add to our panade. This is gonna give our meatloaf that classic Eisenhower flavor. For this, I recommend you get a box grater, because the handheld one that I used was really annoying to hold while continuously pressing down on it with my other hand. Regardless, you're gonna wanna grate in about 5 or 6 ribs worth of celery, 2 or 3 carrots, and then you can dice up 2 or 3 onions. There's no need to grate those. Add them to a skillet with some olive oil or butter and cook it down until translucent and it's reduced by about a half. Then, for some extra flavor, you pour in some stock and reduce that by a half. I'm using a chicken stock that I made earlier. To make our meatloaf, we're gonna have to start with the loaf. Specifically the bready paste called a panade, which is gonna act as a binder for our meatloaf, as well as a sort of flavor sponge into which you can deposit an assortment of various flavorful liquids. I'm kind of just eyeballing what I put into this panade, and I would encourage you to do the same, but I'm gonna say what I added here just for convenience sake. First, I added some panko breadcrumbs, followed by some milk, a hefty tea tablespoon of both garlic powder and onion powder, a few glugs of Worcestershire sauce, some ketchup, 2 tablespoons of liquid smoke, mix all that. Then I cut up some rehydrated morel mushrooms that I had left over from something else, as well as 3 eggs to further bind everything together. Off camera, I added about 2 to 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, as well as some more Worcester sauce to a ketchup bottle that was at its flatulent stage, and I shook that all up and then added that to the paste. Speaking of paste, add some tomato paste for more depth, as well as some Dijon mustard to balance out all that sweetness. Then add in a handful of chopped parsley for some much needed herbaceousness, as well as your now cooled Mirepoix. And then mix this unholy orgy of flavors together. Finally, we can add the meat part to our loaf. Add in about a half-half ratio of freshly ground pig shoulder and cow shoulder, known colloquially as butt and chuck for some reason, and thoroughly mix it up with your hands until pasty and homogeneous, much like the culture that came up with Halloween in the first place. For the Aligot potatoes, quarter some Yukon Golds and boil them until fork tender. Then you're gonna wanna not do what I did. See, what I should have done is put those cooked and quartered Yukon Gold potatoes through a strainer first. What this does is it sort of filters out the skins and yields a silky smooth texture that you can then fortify with the addition of cream and butter, as well as then adding in your stretchy cheese such as a low moisture mozzarella. What I did was unquestionably stupid, and you'll see why right now. First, I added butter, then mashed them up with a potato masher. Then, through a combination of thoughtless action and wishful thinking, I proceeded to add the cheese. It's around this point that I realized the gravity of my error, and its consequences started to permeate my dense skull as I realized all the extra work I'd just handed to myself. See, I'd still have to put it through the strainer, but now that the cheese was incorporated into the mix, it would be that much harder to pass it through. Goody gumdrops, I'm so silly. I'm such a silly, fun individual. How can such a funny individual even go outside without somebody pointing and looking at them and saying, that soulful, fantastic instrumentalist who fancied up the potatoes? Anyway, after about 15 blister-forming minutes, the potatoes were done and my soul was redeemed. I should add that the potatoes are stretchy because of the mozzarella that now forms a web around the individual potato granules and not the gloopy stretch that you get from overmixing your mashed potatoes from, let's say, trying to mash them by using a food processor or a hand mixer. That's a bad stretch. We're talking about a good stretch. To assemble, line a muffin baking sheet with muffin-shaped papers and then plop in your meatloaf mix and create a little indentation for the potatoes. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake them for about 10-15 minutes or until they register 165 internal temp. Then you could go analog and simply pipe in your Aligot potatoes using a piping bag. Or, in the spirit of the season, you can give yourself some editing powers by summoning them with this handy incantation.
Zutaten, Wasser, Zucker, Kohlensäure, Phosphorsäure, natürliches Aroma, Koffein.
Once you've imbued yourself, just snap your potatoes into place. Then, as a garnish, sprinkle on some thyme leaves. And lastly, drizzle on some demi-glaze to thank the beast for giving you such a good deal on those powers. All right, let's eat this. Let me tell you something. If I were a demon and I was tricked into eating this like meatloaf cupcake, I might possess you just to find out how you made this thing. The meatloaf par excellence. It's the perfect blend of sweet and savory. Somehow ketchup and ground meats work really well. I don't know how. And the Aligot potatoes as the stand-in for like vanilla icing was pretty spot on. I mean, it's basically like a savory ice cream. And the crunchy bits of pig heart that substituted for the sprinkles, they work really well in tandem with the thyme and the demi-glaze. All in all, this trick was really a treat. Well, that's it for me, folks. All that meatloaf and cheesy potatoes sure plugged up my portal in between worlds. And as always, do what you love because nobody cares and it doesn't matter.